Hello, welcome back for another weekly update for all my vermicomposting systems. I'm starting with my regular tote bins as I normally do, and is the first of the totes that just completed the harvest with the horizontal migration. There's not a lot of material in here, but there are a lot of happy worms. This week I'm going to hold off on adding any additional material to the bins and just give the bins a nice good feeding of food that has a lot of moisture content, and make sure to keep the bin nice and wet with the bubble wrap. I'm very lucky to have family that keeps their food scraps for me. My mom had some frozen squash left over, so I know this is going to add a good amount of moisture to the bin for the week. Not much I'm going to be doing otherwise to this bin beyond giving it the grit and covering it back up so it is updated for this week. Moving over to my second regular tote, this is the one that I am trying the trash can style method. So far, I think I've kind of gotten the hang of how to move through the cycle with this one. When it comes to harvesting has been a bit of a challenge because there's not much differentiation between what is new casting and what is old castings since I just dumped everything all together. So I did sacrifice a little bit of the finished castings with this particular process, starting it right now. I think that next time, when it's just for the migration, I'll start to do the trash can style after all of the worms have been moved over to the new bedding. But the worms on the other side, they do look very happy and healthy. I don't have any travelers along the edges. So once I scooped up a good portion of the finished castings, there's still maybe like an inch wide gap that is in between the old castings and the finished, or I should say the new bedding and the finished castings. I'm just going to move everything all over. For this bin, I'm going to feed in pockets. So wherever I'm putting the food, I'm going to put a little bit more cardboard instead of just throwing a whole bunch of cardboard all over in the bin, and then go from there and see how the moisture levels are working out for me and see if I have to tweak it in any way. I'm also soaking the cardboard in water prior to adding it to the bin. That way I don't have to put too much moisture as well into the bin. It's starting to warm up. It's now April and it's starting to warm up in my area, and these style bins tend to hold a lot more moisture when it comes to the summer when it gets very humid. But this bin is also finished up for the week. Now for the regular tote, the challenge with this one has been making sure the castings stay moistened while going through a migration style harvest. And I think that means I'm going to have to add more water than I'm normally comfortable with adding into a bin, as I don't really want to get too muddy of a type of casting in the bin during the breakdown cycle or composting cycle. So I'm removing some of the castings because this top layer is truly dry and there weren't any worms in there. As I dug my hands in and got towards the bottom and away from the edges, I started seeing a lot more worms that were still in the finished castings. So that's also going to be a challenge if I continue to do the horizontal migration in Vermibag minis. It's getting the castings to stay moist enough to do something like this. This is why I did choose to do bait trays before. So I guess I kind of have to do a hybrid style harvest on this, which I will try out in the next composting cycle. But overall, I don't seem to feel that the number of worms or the colony is collapsing. I still see a good number of worms in the shredded cardboard and new bedding side. So I left some more in there. There was still, like I said, some worms that were hanging out in the finished castings. And I think by next week, this bin will be finished, which means I will then harvest the larger Vermibag mini, which I'm not really looking forward to, but it is time to harvest that one as well. But this bin is set up for the next week. Moving over to the second of the Vermibag totes, this is the one that was receiving all of the castings with the cocoons and the juvenile worms and the wisps in it, so it is very full. Now, I had every intention of starting a harvest on this one, not so much to get out finished castings, but so that I could put the worms in new bedding so that it wasn't so full in the bag. But as I sifted through the castings with my hands, I noticed that there were some really small worms that were in there. And the sieve that I have for the worms, it's not too fine where I think it would catch the wisps and other cocoons. And then I'd be right back to where I started. So I'm still in mind with the goal of harvesting this at the beginning of May. I just won't do it as soon as I thought I could do it so that I don't lose any of the progress that I've made. As far as the breeder bin, I'm noticing since I cut down on the amount of bedding that there isn't a lot. It's drying out a lot faster and the worms don't seem as active as they were. So I do believe this is going to be the last week that I do the breeder bin in this form. What I'm going to do is wait a couple of months and then do the breeder bins again, taking at least 50 to 100 worms from each bin. I think the colonies will have recovered by then to go ahead and do something like that. So I did give it, I sifted through, made sure it had some food. It did. And I didn't mess with this too much as I was trying to figure out which bin I'm gonna allow these worms to be released back into. So I just set this up for another week. And lastly is the Vermibag Mini. The Vermibag Mini is coming along really well. Since I added some cardboard to it the previous week, it is crunchy and dry on the top. So I'm just trying to mix around all of the material. I'm not noticing that there's any large chunks of food left over from the worms. So I'm going to give this one a good size feeding this week. I did wet the material down as it does tend to stay pretty dry on the top. Not so much in the bottom, but pretty dry on the top. And I'm giving the worms something that really attracts them to come around and feed on, which is banana peels. I have some apples and then some cucumber that will release some good moisture into the bin. So hopefully when I come to the summer months, it won't be so bad with fighting the dry edges, but we'll see how this summer works out. And that is the update for this bin for this week. It really has been quite a challenge this last harvest cycle for me. I did get a lot of castings which I used in my seed starting mixes, and I will be using some that I harvested this week right out in the bin. So if you want to watch my garden videos, you could see how I use my castings in my garden. But if you've gotten this far, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed the content. If you do, please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching.